59A-37.004 is admission criteria and procedures, appropriateness of placement, and continued residency requirements. This is a pretty important section here because you want to make sure that you're taking in the right residents that you are able to care for and allowed to take in, and make sure that when they have those changes and different things that you are discharging them to the appropriate place, because there isn't anything worse than ACA coming in, doing an inspection, and finding that there's someone that shouldn't be in your facility and giving you a citation for that, and you get a deficiency, and then you have to deal with it right on the thing. So always being aware of what's going on in your facility and assessing your residents will help prevent this. So the requirements, number one, admission. In order to be admitted as a resident to the AFCH, an individual must be 18 years of age, be free from apparent signs and symptoms of any communicable disease, including TB, which is likely to be transmitted to others, and it'll be documented in the health assessment form. A person who has an HIV infection may be admitted, provided the person would otherwise be eligible for admission. C, be capable of self-preservation in an emergency situation involving the immediate evacuation of the AFCH with assistance with ambulation if needed. So making sure that they are able to evacuate in a fire or emergency situation is very important. D, be able to perform with supervision or assistance the activities of daily living. E, not be a danger to self or others as determined by a healthcare provider or licensed mental health professional. F, not require licensed professional mental health treatment on a 24-hour basis. G, not have special dietary needs which cannot be met by the provider. H, not be bedridden. I, not have any stage 3 or 4 pressure sores. An individual with a stage 2 pressure sore may be admitted only if the individual is under the care of a licensed nurse pursuant to a plan of care issued by a licensed healthcare provider. Such nursing services must be provided in accordance with the Rule 59A-37.006. So make sure if you have somebody with a stage 1 or 2 pressure sore in your facility that you're continuously monitoring it and it doesn't get bad and increase to a 3 or 4, because you will need to discharge that person. You can contract with the home health agencies or hospice to come in and provide that care and documentation. Make sure that you are just aware of who has them and you're turning your residents. They're not sitting for too long. They're not sitting in soiled undergarments, and make sure you just really stay on top of these pressure sores. J, not require the use of chemical or physical restraints. K, not require 24-hour nursing supervision. Not have personal care or nursing needs which exceed the capability of the provider to meet or arrange for such needs, and the provider is responsible for determining the appropriate placement of the individual in the AFCH. Number 2, the health assessment. Prior to admission to the AFCH, an individual must have a face-to-face medical examination conducted by a licensed healthcare provider, and you must use the ACA form 3110-1023, which is the resident health assessment form for the adult family care homes. And it's available by writing to the agency. And you can also obtain it on the agency's website, which is probably easier to download the form. Each resident must visit their doctor or licensed care provider with this form and have it filled out and submit it back to you. This is part of the assessment process and the admission process. Number 1, items on the form that may have been omitted by the licensed healthcare provider during the examination do not necessarily require an additional face-to-face examination for completion. 2, the AFCH provider or relief person may obtain the omitted information either verbally or in writing from the licensed healthcare provider. So you can give that doctor's office a call, tell them that they left out some information, get that verbal or in writing, and that will suffice this rule. Number 3, omitted information received verbally must be documented in the resident's record, including the name of the licensed healthcare provider, given the information, the name of the AFCH provider or relief person recording the information, and the date that the information was obtained. You can never ever go wrong in this industry with over documentation. So always just a pro tip here, document everything, cover your own, behind. Document. Always leave a paper trail, beginning, middle, and end, so close things out too. B. Every year thereafter or after a significant change, whichever comes first, the resident must have a face-to-face medical examination conducted by a licensed healthcare provider using the form. After the effective date of this rule, providers shall have up to 12 months to comply with this requirement for residents currently living in the AFCH. So take note of this. So every year you're going to have to get this form updated. Make sure that you're sending this to the doctor, healthcare provider, or with the family, or after a significant change, which could be the resident has a fall. They switch over to hospice. They have a change in their cognitive ability. So those are all could be significant changes. In that case, you would need an updated form. 3. House rules and complaint procedures. Prior to or at the time of admission, the AFCH must provide the resident or representative with the following. 1. A copy of the AFCH house rules. 2. The resident bill of rights. 3. Written information reference in Rule 59A 37.003 and the procedure for making complaints to these entities. And that's where we go back to posting the ombudsman, the abuse hotline, and different things. So you need that in a packet. The do not resuscitate orders is what's next. So I recommend actually from the house rules down to the DNR, you have your policies and procedures in place. You put them in your resident contract. You put them in your admission package so you don't miss anything. With the DNR, the do not resuscitate orders, you want to make sure that you honor those and you have those readily available in their file. So H, each AFCH must have written policies and procedures which delineate its position with respect to the state law and rules relative to the DNR. The policy shall not condition treatment or admission upon whether or not the individual has executed or waived the DNRO. So make sure you have your policies and procedures, put that in your admission package, and those are things that ACA will check for when they come and do their inspections. The AFCH policy must include, at the time of admission, providing each resident or resident's representative with a copy of the form SCHSH for 2006, the Healthcare Advanced Directives, the patient's right to decide. So you need to provide these forms to the resident or their family, or with a copy of some other substantially similar document which incorporates information regarding advanced directives. And you can get this form from requesting it from ACA in Tallahassee or download it on their website. Make sure you're making a checklist right now too of what needs to be in your resident admission package, and that way you don't miss anything. Number 2, at the time of admission, providing each resident or the representative with written information concerning the AFCH's policies regarding the DNROs and the DNR order form. 3. The requirement that documentation of whether or not the resident has executed a DNRO must be contained in the resident's record. If a DNRO has been executed, a copy of that document must be made as part of the resident's record. If the AFCH does not receive a copy of the DNRO for a resident, the AFCH must document in the resident record that's requested the copy. And that just goes back to documenting again. Document everything, cover your own behind in this process, and if ACA comes in and they're doing any kind of record things, they'll see your paper trail and then you'll be covered. Number 4, an AFCH shall be subject to revocation of its license as a condition of treatment of admission requires individual to execute or waive a DNRO. So pursuant to the Section 429-73, which is the Florida State Statutes, in the event a resident experiences cardiopulmonary arrest, an AFCH must honor a properly executed DNRO. So make sure your staff is trained, everybody knows who has a DNR and who doesn't, and you're following these so you don't get in trouble. Number 1, the AFCH provider or relief person who is trained in CPR may withhold CPR, or the AFCH provider or relief person shall immediately contact 911. CPR may be withheld or withdrawn from a resident by an individual pursuant to Section 401-45 Florida statutes. Number 3, adult family care home providers shall not be subject to criminal prosecution or civil liability, nor be considered to have engaged in negligent or unprofessional conduct for withholding or withdrawing CPR to such a DNR order and rules adopted by the department. Any AFCH provider who, in good faith, obeys the directives of existing DNRO executed will not be subject to prosecution or civil liability for his or her performance regarding patient care. Make sure you understand what it is, your staff understands what it is, and you're following the proper procedures, and you'll be okay. Number 5, temporary emergency services. Residents placed on an emergency basis by the Department of Children and Family must meet the admission requirement of this rule. However, only residents whose stay in homes exceed 30 days must be examined by a licensed healthcare provider. In this rule, and covered by the residency agreement, a temporary emergency placement may not be made if the placement causes the home to exceed licensed capacity. So DCF can give an emergency placement into your home. However, if you are licensed for 5 and that would make 6 residents, you can't take them in. You can't go over your license capacity. They also must be appropriate for admission criteria to be in your adult family care home too. So they must be able to transfer and have assistance with medication and the different things that are, pertain to all of your residents. And so after the 30 days, if they're going to stay, they're going to need that health assessment form too. Number 6, continued residency. The criteria for continued residency shall be the same as the criteria for admission, including face-to-face medical examination conducted by a licensed healthcare provider, with the following exceptions. So a resident may be bedridden for up to 7 days for a temporary illness. Number 2, a resident with a stage 2 pressure sore must be discharged if the pressure sore has not healed within 30 days or has not been reduced to a stage 1. This is very important when it comes to pressure sores, and make sure that you are managing those properly and documenting. 3, a terminally ill resident who no longer meets the criteria for continued residency may continue to reside in the AFCH if the resident qualifies for, is admitted to, and consents to the services of a licensed hospice which coordinates the additional care that may be needed. So here's the exception to the rule of the things is if hospice comes in and provides these services, you're able to keep people who do not meet the residency criteria. B, continued residency is agreeable to the resident and the provider, and an interdisciplinary care plan is developed and implemented by the hospice in consultation with the provider. Go ahead and highlight this. This is really important, and people get in trouble for this all the time. The interdisciplinary care plan is a very important part of your resident file. When you bring on hospice, you have to have this form. What this is the care plan, and it'll state what hospice is going to provide and what the facility will provide. Usually it'll say something like this. Hospice will provide showers to the resident 2 days a week. Hospice will have a nurse come in 3 days a week and as needed. Hospice will provide incontinence supplies and medication. So basically it just tells who is going to provide what to the resident, so there's no confusion. The interdisciplinary care plan asks for it. It's such an important part of your resident file, and you don't want to get in trouble for not having that. If the resident no longer qualifies for continued residency, the provider shall assist the resident to obtain another placement. The provider is responsible for monitoring and continued appropriateness of placement of the resident in the home. Discharge. Except as provided in paragraph B, a resident shall not be discharged without 30 days written notice stating reasons for the move or transfer. The notice shall be delivered to the resident or resident's representative. Residents shall only be moved or transferred without the required 30-day notice for the Following reasons. 1. The resident's health requires an immediate relocation to a facility which provides a more skilled level of care as certified by a licensed healthcare provider. 2. The resident's behavior poses an imminent danger to self or others, significantly interferes with the orderly operation of the home, or is continually offensive to other residents, or the AFCH has had its license denied, revoked, or has voluntarily surrendered his license. So these are the rules on your discharge. 30 days written notice if you just want them to move on and go to somewhere else if it's not working. If they cannot, all of a sudden they cannot walk, they can't transfer, they can't talk, they require 24-hour nursing services, you are required to help them find a place and discharge them immediately. But what you do is you get their licensed healthcare provider involved. Always contact the doctor, cover your own behind, get them involved, and document everything, and you'll be safe. So if they're posing, a threat, they're threatening to kill someone, maybe they're verbally abusive, physically, sexually abusive, you may have to get the police involved, you may have to Baker Act them. But make sure you are doing this immediately, keeping all your other residents in the home safe, you're documenting it, and you're following proper procedures, and you'll be fine.